Hello, I'm your everyday average Jonathan. Join me this week as I turn this and this into this, what we're calling the snaggle-toothed axe. Hello, I am your everyday average Jonathan. I'm an ordinary guy with ordinary tools making extraordinary items. I'm a self-taught craftsman and amateur blacksmith. I am a novice woodworker. Each week I take you on a new build project with me. I show you my process, I show you my perspective. I don't edit out any of my mistakes. I don't edit out any of my aha moments. The items that I make each week tend to be whimsical in nature, fantastical, echoing times of a forgotten yore, if you will. Items like furniture, novelties, practical items, things that I use on my ranch here in Colorado. But primarily I make weapons and armor, fantastical weapons and armor, and this week will be no different. One of my good friends who I go to church with approached me and said that he would like to work with me and make an axe head. He actually said axe head. He didn't say the full axe, but I'm going to try to convince him that we're going to make the full thing. But here's the cool part. I asked him, what type of axe are you thinking about making? Are you thinking about making a hatchet, a throwing axe, a tomahawk, a double-headed axe? And here's what his answer was. Mind you, he is a church-going 24-year-old young man. This was what his answer was. He said, I want to make an axe for when bullets run out and machines stop working, that I have something to fight off the crazies with. I'm adding that last part, the crazies, but that was certainly implied in the conversation that we got into afterwards. Let me tell you, this answer from him to me was simultaneously three things. The first thing to me is that I thought it was hysterical, because as you will probably see on the video, he's a very jovial human being. He's not super serious about too many things. And the second part that is simultaneously awesome is that means that this design can really be almost anything. It's a free form design. The third part, which actually really doesn't make it all that awesome, it's actually more of a concern for me, is that a young 24-year-old man would have the troubling thoughts enough to say that he wants to actually make an axe that's really for the end of times. But be that as it may, that's his concern, not mine. What I'm intrigued by is the fact that this could be a fantasy weapon. It could be for killing zombies. It could be for defending yourself. It could be for chopping wood. But at no point will this not be anything but awesome. So without further ado, let's get to the shop and get started. So my friend Dave, I met him at church. He is the most thoughtful, intelligent, well-spoken 24-year-old I've ever met. But in my mind, and the devil on my shoulder would like to believe that he's actually 8 years old. So for the rest of this video, that's what we're going to assume here. I was impressed that he came out. His parents let him out, probably past his curfew, to do these mock-ups. He brought with him his best set of crayons. We pulled those out and away we went designing what's going to just be basically the most gnarly, coolest axe that you've ever seen. And here he is assigning his name to his paperwork. I believe he was concerned that it was going to get stolen at recess, but I assured him that there was no recess where we live and that it would be just fine where it's at. I had Dave bring 2 sheets of 1/2 inch steel from him that he bought at the local metal distributors. It would come to be known later that I did not tell him to get the high carbon steel. So it's not as hard as it could be by quite some, but that's okay. The design is what we're after at this point. Dave has done a lot in his young life with tools, with power tools, he's taught welding before, which kind of blows my mind. He was an Eagle Scout. He actually works for the Boy Scouts of America, so he knew his way around tools as well as I did, in fact, probably better in some ways. We decided to make the axe head, not the blade, but the axe head from a separate piece of steel, and it was a very thick piece of steel, and I was going to attempt to what is called drift it. And I was very much looking forward to showing off and showing off to my young Padawan and showing him how to drift something. We'll see that didn't work out so well, but here what we're trying to do is just stretch out the metal of the blade. This will mark the first time that I've ever had somebody actually work with me a piece of metal on the anvil, as you'll see here. Dave was excellent with the hammer. He looked like he'd been hammering all his life. And let's listen as I shout him encouragement at a high volume. I was worried about his arm getting tired, and I did promise his parents that I'd make sure to give him some food and keep him hydrated. After a few hammer blows, gave him some goldfish, little suck off his sippy cup, and off we went to practice drifting. Now here, I got this wrong in every which way. This wasn't straight whatsoever.
That's pretty straight, right? Keep flipping over. I was joking. Just straight adjacent. Extremely not straight.
Yeah, that wasn't straight whatsoever. But I pulled out the giant hammer that I had made many years ago to move this metal, and then we got an idea. Like the Japanese masters, we decided that we could co-hammer this. That's probably what they said too, co-hammer. I want you to take notice of the young Padawan's use of his legs during each stroke. Dave is no short drink of water, so getting down to my anvil length, he did have to bend his knees a little bit. And I'll be honest with you, he and I hitting that moved the metal very, very quickly. Here I am trying to drift this, and drifting is essentially punching with a steel punch or a chisel, punching a hole through metal. It's how the blacksmiths of yore would make the eyes in axe head, how they would make that, because they didn't have drill presses, they didn't have drills. So they would go ahead and punch this through molten metal, through red hot metal. Looking at the way that this was going to go, it became very clear that I was not going to be able to punch a hole through that anytime this century. So what I decided to do was something that makes me shiver, but I just decided to cheat and start drilling and boring larger and larger diameter holes through this. Once we got the 3/8 inch hole established through this piece of metal, I did heat it back up and started to take drifts and punches and chisels and push them through to widen that hole out. Again, I am taken with how easily Dave just took to using these different machines and different tools. He sort of innately understood how to use them. I don't know if he's used a grinder of that size, probably never before. And then this particular sanding wheel, he just understood roughly how to do that. I pulled out my little bin of barbs and bits and bobs to start making some of the teeth or the hooks that we're going to put on this. And I think in the end, it just turned out that we needed to just go ahead and fabricate them on. We didn't have anything of the right size. Now, Dave, when he was, I believe, 17, taught a welding class, which blows my mind. And picking up my extremely janky MIG welder, he just got it up and running perfectly fast. I'm heating this only because the hook that we just put on it needed a little bit of tweaking. The weld didn't set up quite perfectly, so I was just heating it to get it going. Dave had to leave. I believe it was his bedtime, so I gave him a nice pat on the head, a little suck on his sippy cup, and sent him on his way. It was great to have him, and in fact, I will be honest that in working on the rest of this project for the next few days, I actually missed him a ton. It wasn't the same working on this project without him there. His sense of humor and his joie de vivre and his can-do attitude are just infectious. So Dave, if you're looking at this on your little children's tablet, this video, I love you, brother. I miss you. I wish that you'd been able to finish this build with me, but off we go. Because I'm not good enough as a blacksmith to stretch the metal out the way I wanted to, I'm going to weld the axe face, the cutting face of the axe onto the axe head. I'm not proud of this. I'm not happy that I can't move the metal the way that a real blacksmith and a weapons maker and armor smith can, but it is what it is. As with anything I do, I don't think I make anything that can be considered light, dainty, or soft in the hand. This was a beast of an axe head. Even as a one-handed axe that it's going to be, it was a beast. You'll see the little fissures in that one side where I actually burnt the steel. I got it too hot and it actually burnt it. But Dave liked it. He liked the idea of them being there, and he asked to leave them in, which I think is super cool. So now I'm going to put a little hook on the end, a little spike on the end of the axe. I think that's a farm implement that I'm cutting up there that I've collected. And I'm going to give it a little bit of clearance. I'm going to weld several segments on here to give it kind of a segmented, almost a wasp-like tail end to it, if you will. This is it after I've ground it down quite a bit and how it's going to look once I set it up. A lot more grinding, a lot more profiling onto this to get it the look that I wanted it to get. Now, because Dave requested that this be a pretty rough looking instrument, which is really up my alley because I'm not good at doing anything that's more refined, we're just going to leave it brutish, rough, but the edge of it, I wanted to put some edging in there. I did not get this super sharp. I was going to get it sharp enough that you could feel there's an edge there, but I really am going to leave it up to Dave to make this weapon sharper and less axe-like, maybe more blade-like. As I do with everything, when I quench it, I will come back and I will hit it with this little sander, this little sponge sander, to give it those occlusions, that hammered look, which I like so much. Now it's time to pick out the handle. We had looked at several different handles and I just wasn't liking the way that they looked and how long that they were. So I have some old maul handles, some old axe handles that I chose from. I ended up going with a maul handle. It just seemed like it was the right girth and heft for what this blade was. The only real criteria I had for the handle, other than it needed to fit correctly onto the axe head, was the length. I knew that this needed to be something that Dave could reach down from his high chair while he's eating dinner and pick it up and wield it quickly. But also being the father of 2 young girls, I also knew that it was important enough that it was long enough and thick enough that we could keep it far enough away from him so it didn't snag on his diapers if he was swinging it errantly. You know, kids, if it's possible for them to hurt themselves, break something around them, or hurt somebody around them, it will happen. It's not a matter of might it happen, it's going to happen. So this, I'm trying to make the eye section that's going to go up inside the eye of the axe, and this was actually really difficult. I used a whole bunch of different saws, but apparently the wood on that is so aggressively strong that I could not get most of my saws through it. So I was using this fine tool, this multi-tool, and it was really the only thing that would allow me to do this. This took a lot of time, and I thought, what better way than to mark the top by using black spray paint? Yeah, that didn't really work out so well for me at all. I felt bad not waiting for Dave to do this. I know how much kids love to work with paint, but I realized that he was probably going to get himself and his clothes just completely filthy, so I took care of it ahead of time. And many hits on the sanding belt, many tweaks, many test fitting. It finally got to the right size, as you can see here, to get the axe head and the handle together. Came out as a really good fit. I'm really proud of it. I did need to put some epoxy in the top, but I waited to make the wedge first. And the wedge that I made is actually walnut. It's actually a really cool wedge that I put into the top that is a thick and hard walnut. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to put in the artist touch mark. I'm going to get this hot, and this is what you're about to see here is a real demonstration of just complete dexterity and acuity with tools here. Yeah, I'm just going to set this up and give it a little tappy tap right there. Yeah, there. Oh, yeah. Good thing I'm wearing steel-toed boots. All right, well, learn that lesson. Now it's time to do this correctly, and this time I put something underneath it to make sure that I got it. Okay, that didn't really last very long on that side, but it's all right. What I'm going to... Oh, bummer. Well, good thing Dave's not here. And if I'm to be honest, now I'm just pissed off, so I'm just going to get that whole thing as hot as heck and beat the heck out of it. I don't care where it goes to at this point. I think I put like 17 touch marks in his blade. But I did quench the edge. It's not high enough carbon steel for this to actually really matter, but I did quench the edge. Now, Dave had requested that there be a metal something on the bottom of this. It could be a cap, it could be a handle, it could be a spike. I chose to do a handle, sort of, that's going to have a little ring of iron, a twisted ring of iron that's going to be held there so he can hang it up upside down, or it can be fixed to a belt or something like that. So like I do with most of my sheet metal armoring work, I texture it, I put a lot of hammer blows into it, and then I'm going to go ahead here and get it a hole drilled through to fasten it to the handle. I've done this several times before in things that I've made. I put these little grooves into the wooden handle. It just gives a little bit of extra character and a little bit of extra purchase to the handles. I like the way it looks, and it doesn't slide quite so freely in the hand, which I think is a positive. I collect rings. I collect all sorts of rings, but what I did have is I had these old tractor tire chain rings that I was going to use, and they have this really cool twist to them. They're very girthy, very heavy, and I just decided that that was what I was going to use because they're extremely old, very well used, and extremely hard metal. Now I decided that I was going to make a really dark stain. Dave wanted this to be black, and what's interesting is that wooden handle was oak. It didn't take the stain the first several times. I ended up having to put some paint on it as well. Here's that cap, that handle that you see here, and I am just going to go ahead and drill that straight in. I'm going to fashion my own rivet and just put a single rivet into that to capture it. So I am almost ready here, and I'm going to go deliver this to David, and it tickles me pink to just think that maybe this axe and the look of it and receiving it will excite him so much that he might even utter his first words when he receives it. I can't think of anything more magical. But here you have it. We're calling it the snaggle-toothed axe. I really love the way this turned out. It's brutish. It's for the zombie apocalypse, the end of times. It just stands out. It's going to draw a lot of eyes to it. I love it. And off we are to deliver it to my friend's house. And in the time that he had been building it with me, and now he had injured his foot pretty good, which we'll get to in a second here.
I'm ready for this axe.
I can't help but notice how he walks straight past me. No high five, no hug, no how you doing, just straight to the axe. This is it.
Oh, yes. Oh, this is nasty.
In toddler speak, I believe nasty means good.
Oh, it's not. It's actually really good.
Well, I'm very happy with the reception. I did need to let him get back into his house and put his foot up because indeed he had injured it. I believe it's from slipping on his passy or stepping on one of his Legos. And he is obviously not that young. So I did let him get back into his house because after all, just hitting puberty can be extremely draining. Well, thank you for joining me for this build. This was a really interesting, somewhat frustrating project. It marks one of the few times that I'm actually able to make something with somebody, to actually go in and work on things together, especially somebody like David who definitely knows a thing or two about tools, safety, much more about safety than I do. And I have this suspicion that this won't be his and my last project together. I certainly hope that it won't be. Okay, straight in, what did I learn from this? The very, very first thing is this area that has been burnt. I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but that area of metal that has been burnt. It's the second time that I've been trying to make something like an axe head or a hammerhead where the steel just got too hot and burnt. Now here's the crazy thing. From everything I've seen and everything I've read, steel needs to get really, really hot before it can burn. And I will tell you right now that this steel was not that hot, at least not by visual color or by the temperature of my forge. Everything I've read and heard is that the metal needs to get orange, yellow, and then almost yellow-white hot before it starts to burn. This steel never got that color, so I don't quite understand. Just like the hammer that I built before where I burnt the head, I don't really understand why it's burning. I just don't know it. There may be a possibility that it's too much oxygen being blasted onto the actual surface of the steel. It also may have been that I quenched it in water. I cooled this in water a few times and then put it back in the forge. I suspect that probably is more likely what it is. Other thing that I learned, and I've already known this, but I just want to point this out, is I tried to oil darken this piece on the handle, and by doing so I put it into the forge, got it hot, pulled it out, just dunked it in oil. That just is not going to work out for oil darkening. I've done it before and it starts to flake off. The oil gets too hot and it forms like this coating that then flakes off. It doesn't really impregnate with the steel. So I'm just going to stop that altogether. Last thing that I learned, and I hate to say it, I just do. I would like to say that the steel on this particular axe is high carbon tool steel. It's not, and it's my fault. I told David where to go to buy steel. I told him the dimensions, but what I didn't tell him to do was to ask for the highest carbon content steel in those dimensions that they can. So I think the steel that he got probably is just mild steel or cold rolled steel. It's still decent, but in complete transparency, this is not that hard of a steel. Actually, there is a fourth thing. While I've been talking to the camera and sitting here, I have noticed that the head of this moves ever so slightly. So I could go ahead and drive in an additional wedge. There are some metal wedges that I have. I think I'm going to do that. Either that or I'm just going to take a couple spikes and put them into the top head here. There is literally nothing I would want less in this world than to give somebody an axe like this and have the head be slightly wobbly. It's like giving somebody a chair that you made and one of the legs is wobbly. I just can't do it. But that's it for me for this week. Join me next week. I'm going to begin a project that is going to be, well, let me see if I can describe it this way. You know those cat houses, those multi-layered cat play structures, cat houses where the cat can jump from one platform to the next and so on and so forth. I'm going to make one of those, but I'm going to make it for a bearded dragon. So it's going to be kind of a smaller format. It's going to be kind of a jungle gym for a bearded dragon, and it's going to be one that I can fasten to a desktop versus standing on the floor. That said, I look forward to sharing that project with you then. If you like projects like this that are whimsical, fantastical, just interesting or odd, please check out my channel for other builds like that. Until then, God bless. We'll see you next week.